Welcome to What's Going On, the weekly podcast and videocast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota.
Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of What's Going On. I'm Pastor Katie here at First United Methodist in Yankton, South Dakota. I'm glad you could join me for this episode. We are transitioning from our school year into our summer, and this year that is a bigger transition than normal because I will be going on renewal leave in a few weeks. And so there has been a lot of things that we're getting in place for that to happen and to happen smoothly. And then also our office manager, Lisa, is also taking time off this summer. And so wonderful Diane Kish is going to be manning the office over the summer, and she's going to do a wonderful job. But again, I just want to keep reminding you of that so that you are aware when you stop by the church or if things are not happening in the same way or in the same time frame that they might usually happen. We are going to be running a little bit of a skeleton crew over the summer in that way. But I just want to give a couple of quick announcements before I dive into the thing I'd like to talk about today. So we do have VBS coming up again, May 29th, 30th, 31st. On Friday evening is when we are hosting the meal. So if you are able to help with that, please let me know. Would love to have you come and see the kids and be a part of that. All of that's happening at Memorial Park. And we will be having worship service on June 1st at Memorial Park at 10 a.m. And so make sure that you are ready for that. If it is raining or absurdly cold or something, we will come here for worship. If it is raining during Vacation Bible School days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, our rain location will be at Trinity Lutheran because we do VBS with Trinity Lutheran and the UCC Church. So make sure you get signed up for that. I'm super excited. VBS is always a fun time. And so I hope that we have all of our kids there for that. And then don't forget that we also have annual conference coming up, and we are doing some gathering of mission items for the miracle offering at annual conference. And so make sure that you get those in by June 5th so that we can take those with us to Mitchell for annual conference happening that following weekend. So, so today I've recently been getting back into some reading. I know that you probably think, Pastor Kitty, don't you read all the time? And I do. I read quite a bit for work. And one of the reasons I started the Pastor Book Club is because I had books that I would wanted to read and wanted to have someone to talk about. And so I was doing that as well. I got as a gift this lovely little book journal, and it says I'm booked all week, book lovers journal, and I'm really enjoying it. And it's kind of helping me get back into some reading. And it's been interesting because at different points in my life, there's different kinds of books that I like to read. Sometimes it's all sort of fiction and entertainment and escapism. I went through a pretty severe Sarah J. Maas hole for about a year and a half because she has so many books and she's a fantasy author. And so I did that, and then I had to like quit reading for a little bit because I was just kind of burnt out on that sort of genre. And so this year I started reading books again that either I've read before or from authors that really speak to me in some way. And so started the year off reading Anne Lamott, read Kathleen Norris. Kathleen Norris, I think more than anybody, is an author that when I read what she writes, it feels like coming home to myself. She speaks in such a way and talks about things in such a way that it speaks to my soul, and I can't explain it any other way. But it's been a really helpful thing. Those two books in particular are books that I've read before. We did Help Thanks Wow, and then from Kathleen Norris read Amazing Grace, A Vocabulary of Faith. Some of her other books include Dakota and Cloister Walk, and those books are also near and dear to my heart in that when I read them, it's like someone, again, putting on page so beautifully things that I know myself and feel and experience. And I hope that you have authors like that too. If you are a reader and you read kind of a variety of things, that you have people that that you have discovered who, when you read their work, or maybe it's music, when you listen to them, or perhaps it's a movie. I have movies like that as well, that if I watch them, it's like coming home to myself. If I feel kind of untethered or unmoored, honestly, I'll put on some Jane Austen or Little Women or something, and it's like, yeah, there I am. Yeah, that's me. Like that, it just speaks to a part of me that is me, and I've been really enjoying doing that lately. Um, and so I've been reading Pete Enns is another one that has been really speaking to me a lot. And we his book was the final Pastor Book Club book for this school year. We did his The Sin of Uncertainty. And so it's been really good. And so I decided, because I got this book journal, to keep track of the books that I'm reading for 2025. And so far, I have read, and this is totally a brag, like, and for some of you, you're gonna be like, that's it. Like, I've read one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, 8 books. And when I say read, I mean read, but also listen, because I also use the Audible app and listen to books while I'm driving, or, if I'm laying in bed. And so I count that as reading as well, because I am consuming those books as well. And one of the books that I just finished a couple of books. One I picked up from the local library. Shout out to Yankton Community Library. You guys, I don't know how this happened, but Yankton has one of the best libraries. And I mean that in that the people who work at that library and the things that they do for this community and the way that they are connected is just incredible. The library is one of my favorite things about Yankton. I again, it's another place where I walk in and I feel at home. I feel like people get me, they know me, they love my kids, they're doing things constantly. My kids love to be there, I love to be there. And I picked up a book last week that was on kind of the new release shelf, and it was called Happy to Help: Adventures of a People Pleaser. And it was a series of essays about from a woman who's maybe 10 years older than me, but oh my gosh, even though she lives in New York and is an actress, there was so much parallel between her life and mine, as far as the way that we understand things and the way that we tend to maybe over uh, function and try to take care of everybody and try to make everybody happy, and in the process kind of lose ourselves. I don't know if any of you are like that. I'm going to tell you right now that I am absolutely like that. I know that many of you have talked to me about, like, I don't know how you are a mom and a wife and a pastor, and how do you juggle and do all these things? And the answer is oftentimes the cost of that is not always taking the best care of myself, and having that need to find things that help me to come home to myself, because I can get lost in the busyness, lost in the craziness, lost in the schedule, where I'm trying to be there and do things for everybody that I care about. And I'm blessed to have so many people that I care about, but um, the challenge of that and the danger of that is often the person who I overlook the most is me. And so that book was really one, it's got some incredibly poignant essays and stories of her life and things that she went through as a mother, but also some really funny moments. And there's a story in there about when she her family wanted to learn how to ski, downhill ski, and that did not go well for her. Um, and so I would recommend that book if you are looking for a book to read. The other author I've been and I would say listening to more than reading is Malcolm Gladwell. I came across one of his books a few years ago called Talking to Strangers, and I'll be honest that I have no idea how I came across this book, but I was listening to it when I was working out at the gym, and it was so fascinating. And he's a reporter, but he also has a series of books out where he connects these different stories to kind of to this overarching theme and paints this picture and shows. And so in Talking to Strangers, it's kind of about our assumption that we understand and know people better than we do, that we kind of can simplify somebody else and think it's so obvious what they're going through, and really we have no idea. And he talks about it in terms of like espionage and how double agents work and how easy it is for them to be a double agent, even in a setting where, you're kind of supposed to be suspicious of everybody. That's the one in particular I remember from that book. And then recently, read Revenge of the Tipping Point, which is a fascinating book about how like uh, pandemics and endemics happen, but also like how cultural fads happen and how like public opinion can sway and what it takes. And it's so fascinating. Like I listen to those books because I find them interesting and they cause me to think and to reframe maybe how I'm looking at the world and to ask different questions. The last one I just read was called David and Goliath, um, which is really about kind of the story of the underdog and how so often we make assumptions about those in power that um, they're more powerful than they really are. Like when you look at Goliath, you think, this 9 foot tall guy, whatever, he's obviously got all all the cards are on his side. The deck is stacked in his favor 100% more so than this little David, this little shepherd boy with a slingshot. And yet David comes out the victor, and he's arguing that maybe the things that made Goliath this monolithic, massive person also was the source of his weakness because, um, we know that people who have sort of these growth hormone diseases that cause them to grow also can make them very weak. And you can look at like Andre the Giant as an example if you are a fan of 80s wrestling, or like me, a massive fan of The Princess Bride. He was a massive man, but his heart was strained all the time. And so the thing that made him look so powerful also is what was his greatest weakness. And so oftentimes we give way too much power to and sort of believe that people with these advantages have all the cards, when in reality there's a lot of advantage to being the underdog. And so the book was exploring kind of different ways that is true and how that plays out, and different factors that go into like people who had a really hard childhood, how, or something like dyslexia, but how there have been people with dyslexia who have gone on to have great success. And oftentimes it can be attributed to the factors of how they had to overcome dyslexia, gave them the tools and the experience needed to be successful. Like there's a really high correlation rate between people in really like successful careers having dyslexia. Now, that doesn't mean that every person with dyslexia is going to go on to success, but that there was this weird thing of like when you had a hardship or a thing that kind of made you seem like the underdog in overcoming that thing or learning how to adapt to it, it also gave you skills that some people were able to parlay into great success. Or, and then also on the flip side, you know, people or things that we assume that just automatically you're going to make your life easier and easier. That is not always the case. And one of the examples was people who have a lot of wealth, it's actually a lot harder for them to raise children with good character and work ethic. The very things that helped them to achieve that success and that wealth, it becomes the more that they have, the harder it is to raise children because the children just have everything and they don't have to work for it. So they don't develop that work ethic and they don't develop those things. And so anyway, it was super fascinating. And I love the way that he kind of brings in all these different life experiences and stories and things in different realms of our world to kind of illustrate and show these things. But it got me thinking about churches because I mean, that's who I am. That's my context. That's where my brain will go naturally because that's the role that I'm in. And how often we will look at large churches or churches that have a lot of money or a lot of people or a lot of resources, and we think, that's it. They're doing everything right. It's so much easier to be a Christian in a situation like that because you have people and you have resources and the worship is entertaining and they've got these praise teams and look at the screens and they're going on all this stuff. And you look at churches that are smaller and you think it's just all struggle. And why would I want to be in a church like that when I can give all of this, like all of this is there to serve me and support me? And And I started thinking about that, especially when I was listening to that piece about how, like, the more that people had, they called it, there's kind of like this U curve. Like, there is a reality where when you have nothing, it's incredibly difficult, right, to parent because you don't have no resources. There's nothing that, everything's a struggle. And that is really hard. And so, as you start to have some resource, it becomes easier, right? But we tend to think that that is just like a straight, like infinitely, the more resources you have, the easier life is. And the reality is that is not true. It's actually a U curve, and it can become easier and easier and easier. And then it hits a point where you can throw more money at stuff, you can throw more resources at stuff, and then it actually becomes more difficult again. I think that's true with churches as well, even though we don't really want to see it, that there is a sense of when you have nothing, when there's no budget, when there are no people, when there is nothing, like nobody to do anything, or you've become so small that there is no real ability to do much, or have much. You have no children in worship or something. That's legitimately hard and legitimately difficult. And then those churches start growing a little bit, and things really do start to flourish, right? But there becomes a point of diminishing returns. And there comes a point where you can get too big and you can have too many programs and too much polish and too much professionalism and too many things where, you may have a lot of people, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to spiritual depth and growth. And I think sometimes we get caught up in looking around at what other people have or what other churches have, or wishing that, whatever, when the reality is maybe who we are and where we are is in a really beautiful place where we're still on that upswing of a bell curve, um, before those diminishing returns, before we start to head back down because, the focus of church has shifted from making disciples of Jesus Christ to maintaining a certain size, a certain status, a certain, influence, or just having a certain, number of butts in the seats, and not so much caring or being able to care about individual discipleship, but really, having to kind of do things through programs, and you don't really know your pastor, and things like that. And so I started, kind of just reflecting on that for myself of, um, is there a different lens for us to think about where we are as a church? And I think honestly, we are at this really incredible place where, one, we are moving away from dependence on programming and dependence on staff in order to do the work of the church for us, and back into we do this together, we are this together, the church is all of us, and we all participate and we all contribute and we all, buy into, the vision of the kingdom of God, and working on that together and sharing in that together. And I think that's a way more healthy system. We're large enough that we can still have people and find people and connect with each other, but we're not so large that we are tempted to, miss the point and to focus on other things that can become stumbling blocks if you get too big of an organization, where people can, become consumers of the faith rather than practitioners of the faith. And so I'm saying all of this, one, because I really do believe that we are in this beautiful sweet spot as a church, and that this is a real time for, rejoicing and flourishing. And I just want you to see what I see, which is, we have so much value right now. So stop looking left and looking right, but really look intently on what the gift is of this church for you. Um, because the reality is, I don't think we're the underdog, but I also don't think that, we're not David, but we're not Goliath either, right? Um, we've been through some things, but that's, I think, helped to make us stronger and clearer about who we are and what we want to do and who we want to be. And I'm really excited about that. And there is a reason that I love this church so much. Um, and why I love being here and serving here and the things that we're doing together. Um, I just feel like these things are happening because of who we are and because of the church we are growing into being. And it's not a church that is going to be obsessed with how many how many butts are in the pew on a Sunday morning, but measuring our success in the investment that we have into the kingdom of God. And when I see more and more people rising up and saying, this is something that I think we can do and we should do, this is a way that we can invest in our community, and that it's not driven by the pastor, but it's driven by you. And that's awesome because things that are driven by you are what you have buy-in in, and it's what you care about. And if I were to get plucked out of this church tomorrow, these things would still happen because you are making it happen. If everything was driven by staff or driven by me, um, I feel like that's not actually that healthy of a system, that the church, the staff is here to support the church and to create opportunities and to support those opportunities, but it's the people of the church that do the things. The ministry of the church is done by the people of God. And so we've been trying to move to a system where we are less and less um, dependent on staff doing ministry and more looking at staff as facilitators of ministry for all of us to participate in together. And that's a different kind of system, but I think it is that kind of system that really is that sweet spot of um, deep discipleship and learning and growing without kind of the distractions that can sometimes happen in other systems. And so I'm looking forward to on my renewal time one, continuing to have opportunities to come home to myself as I take a break and know that I will not. You probably won't see me much this summer. I'm not planning to worship in person. That's not because I don't love all of you. It is because I have a problem that if I am here, I will be working. And in order to care for myself in this time, I need to allow myself to not do that. So it's my own boundary for my own sake. Um, but please know that my hope is that in coming home to myself more and more and reminding myself of who God has created me to be and what God is calling me to do, that I will be refreshed and renewed for the next season, the next stage of ministry here in Yankton and in the United Methodist Church, and what that looks like as I continue to um, also tend to my family as a mother and a wife. And um, I am I am looking forward to that time, and I hope that we can come back together in August with some renewed sense of purpose and energy for what is coming next. But uh, yeah, I'm always amazed that, like the books I've been listening to and reading aren't necessarily, not all of them at least, are necessarily like Christian books that talk about God, but yet um, help me, I think, in so many ways understand and view the world in a different way. And then God speaks to me through those things, and I'm grateful for that. Uh, so just so you are aware, next week we will have a podcast, and then the podcast is going to go on hiatus for the summer, as I will not be working, as I just said. Um, but I will bring the podcast back in the fall because I do enjoy this time to get to share from my heart and off the top of my head, and I hope that you are enjoying it as well and find it interesting. If there are things that you would like on this podcast, you can please let me know. I am definitely open to it shifting and morphing into whatever is going to be most useful. And so uh, that's that's kind of where I'm at with that. But I hope to come back with a whole new slew of books for us to share together in Pastor Book Club in the fall, and to be reading over the summer again to fill my own heart and fill my own cup. Because this people pleaser needs to find some time to please um, her own heart. So with that, I hope that you have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. It's weird that it's so early this year, but I hope that you are able to find some time to relax, and we'll see you very soon. God bless. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Going On, a video and audio podcast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. We'd love to have you join us for worship on Sundays at 10 a.m., either in person or via our live stream, which can be found at our website, www.firstumcyankton.org, or by searching First UMC Yankton on YouTube.